It began with a sound he couldn't name. Soft, deliberate, like a gloved hand brushing against glass. Elias Ward sat alone in the Pembroke study, where the air smelled of rain and old silver nitrate. The lamps trembled. He thought it was the wind again, until the floorboards creaked. Slow, spaced, human. He called out, but only his echo answered. Dust swirled where no wind blew. On his desk, a book of Victorian photographs fell open by itself, revealing a portrait that hadn't been there before. His own face, blurred, standing behind Clara Pembroke, the assistant who vanished in 1893. His pulse quickened. He turned toward the mirror above the fireplace and froze. His reflection did not follow. It smiled first, then it lifted its hand to wave. Somewhere, a camera clicked, though none had been set to record. The storm had not ended. It had only moved inside. Hours later, Elias replayed the footage again and again. Each time the sound came sooner, that strange click of the camera before the reflection moved. He slowed the video to half speed. A faint whisper emerged between frames, a woman's voice calling a name he did not know. The timestamp glitched, reversing by seconds each time he blinked. His rational mind fought the impossible, but the deeper he zoomed, the clearer the figure became. Lace, pale fingers, and eyes that seemed to recognize him. Elias whispered her name from the diary, lying open beside him. Clara. At that word, the monitor flickered, and her reflection leaned closer from within the paused frame. Sleep would not come. Every time Elias closed his eyes, he saw the still image breathing, subtle shifts in the corner of the screen, like Clara waiting for acknowledgement. He searched online archives, fingers trembling as thunder shook the windows. The Pembroke Estates records were scarce, experiments in chronophotography, rumors of seances, but then he found an article dated 1894. Local woman vanishes in photographic trial. The grainy photograph beside it showed Edmund Pembroke, eyes hollow, camera beside him like an altar. Elias leaned closer. The man's profile mirrored his own. He stared until the headline blurred, until lightning split the sky and the power went out. Morning came gray and wrong. Elias found his study door ajar, though he remembered locking it. The air inside shimmered faintly, as though light refracted through water. His equipment had shifted position. The tripod angled toward the mirror, the camera lens smeared with something oily. He cleaned it, and his fingertips came away black. The smell was chemical, old photography emulsion. From nowhere, the antique clock chimed 13 times. He stared at the mirror. Faint words appeared on the fogged glass. "I see you!" He stepped back, heart pounding, whispering, "Who are you?" But the reflection did not answer. It only watched. At dusk, Elias decided to reset the cameras. He spoke aloud to the empty room, explaining his plan as if someone listened. The silence that answered felt almost polite. As he adjusted the tripod, the reflection in the lens caught motion. A flicker of fabric, a human outline just beyond focus. He froze, pulse hammering. "Clara," he whispered. The camera began recording on its own. A figure stepped briefly into frame behind him, pale, translucent, smiling sadly. Elias turned too late. The room was empty again, but on the playback, the figure lingered 3 seconds longer than reality allowed. The footage played in silence for nearly an hour before Elias saw it, the flicker between seconds. The figure wasn't moving through the room. The room was moving through it. Time bent around her like water. Clara's outline shimmered, transparent one moment, solid the next. As Elias advanced frame by frame, he noticed something impossible. In one still, her hand rested on his shoulder. He hadn't felt it when recording. He leaned closer to the monitor, breath held. On her wrist glinted a locket, engraved with the initials EP. The same mark was carved faintly into the desk before him, though he had never seen it before that night. Morning brought a knock that sounded heavier than wood. Inspector Rowan Hale arrived, tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes the cold gray of bureaucracy. Elias tried explaining what he had filmed, but Hale only smirked, muttering about overwork and old houses. Yet, when he saw the footage, his grin faltered. He leaned closer, squinting. "Where did you get this actress?" Elias said nothing. The inspector rewound the clip, freezing on the reflection's wave, the same gesture Elias's mirror self had made nights before. Hale exhaled sharply, then demanded to see the mirror. As he approached it, the reflection blinked once, though neither man had moved. By afternoon, Hale had gone, leaving behind the echo of disbelief. Elias opened the old Pembroke journals again, brushing dust from brittle pages. He found a passage written in fading ink. "The camera does not see ghosts. It remembers what time forgets." Beneath the line was a rough sketch. A man holding a camera, his reflection turning away. The handwriting matched the inscriptions found on the estate's walls. Elias traced the ink with shaking fingers, realizing Edmund Pembroke hadn't been trying to photograph spirits. He had been trying to record time itself. Night returned with the whisper of the river beyond the estate. Elias set the camera again, this time facing both the mirror and the door. The house seemed to breathe with him, boards shifting, air expanding. He read Clara's diary aloud, his voice unsteady. "He said the glass was a doorway," her entry began, "but it opens both ways." The camera light blinked red. The mirror trembled faintly, and behind his reflection another shape stirred. Not Clara, but a man in Victorian clothing, face obscured by glare. Elias whispered, "Edmund." The figure stepped closer until its outline overlapped perfectly with his own. When Elias awoke at dawn, he was still standing before the mirror. The recording had stopped on its own. On the playback, Edmund's reflection reached toward the lens, fingertips nearly touching glass. Then came a distortion, the frame folding inward, colors bleeding. A final whisper escaped the static. "Help me finish it." Elias turned to the mirror once more. His reflection now wore Edmund's clothing. He reached up, touched his collar. But in the glass, the hand that moved was not his. The diary was hidden behind a false panel in the library wall, its pages warped from decades of damp. Elias lifted it with trembling hands. Inside, Clara's handwriting spiraled into desperation, ink scratched so hard it cut the paper. "He says the mirror must remember what the body forgets," she wrote. "He says, my likeness will live forever." The words chilled him. Every page seemed aware of being read. The more he turned, the fresher the ink appeared, as though the diary were writing itself in real time. A faint scent of lavender lingered from the paper, and under it, the bitter tang of photographic chemicals. He read until dawn. Clara's words spoke of Edmund's obsession, how he believed mirrors captured echoes of time, and that one perfect exposure could anchor the soul. She described her last night, being told to stand before the mirror as Edmund adjusted the camera, her reflection refusing to align. "He said I was not the one inside anymore." Elias felt a tremor move through the floorboards. The air around him grew colder. He whispered into the empty library, "Clara, what did he do to you?" The mirror beside the shelves answered with a faint, breathy sigh, feminine, near his ear. In the study, Elias compared the handwriting in the diary with the scrawls carved into the mirror's wooden frame. They matched perfectly. Beneath the carvings lay something else, faint grooves forming letters invisible unless lit from below. He angled a lamp upward. The hidden words appeared. "Forgive him." The reflection of the phrase shimmered backward in the mirror, becoming "forget him." He stepped closer, breath frosting the glass. His own reflection mouthed something he hadn't said. The voice that answered came from behind the mirror, calm and male. "I tried to keep her safe." Elias's pulse thundered. "Edmund," he whispered, though he knew no one lived. The figure in the mirror nodded slowly, lips moving soundlessly. Then a woman's reflection appeared beside him. Clarice, weeping. The glass clouded, their faces merging in a blur of anguish. Elias stumbled back, knocking the diary to the floor. Pages fluttered open on their own, revealing a final entry that had not been there before. "The historian will finish what he began." The ink dripped like blood. When Elias looked up, the mirror was empty. But on the glass, his name was written from the inside. He ran from the study into the corridor, clutching the diary like a relic. The house answered with creaks and whispers, portraits watching as he passed. Every mirror reflected something different. His own face growing older, the eyes not quite his. When he reached the grand staircase, the banister was warm beneath his palm, pulsing faintly like skin. He froze. From upstairs came the faint sound of a camera shutter. Once, twice. Then silence. Elias turned toward the noise, heart pounding. In that moment, he realized he was being filmed. From somewhere he could not see, Elias had begun talking to the mirrors as if they were people. Each surface answered differently. One with silence, another with a delay, and one, the study mirror, with a perfect imitation of his own voice. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you watched," it replied. The words came not through air but through bone, vibrating in his teeth. The reflection's mouth shaped his speech a heartbeat too late, but its eyes were no longer his. They belonged to Edmund. Elias stumbled backward, clutching Clarice's diary. From its open page came a faint rustling. Though there was no wind, the ink rearranging itself into new lines that spelled his name. The days lost sequence. Elias found clocks disagreeing by hours. His meals untouched decayed in moments. The walls seemed to exhale when he passed. He reviewed the footage again. Clara standing behind him, mouthing words he couldn't hear. He adjusted the volume. Beneath the static, a faint lullaby emerged. The same melody his mother had hummed decades ago. His chest tightened. "You know me," he whispered to the screen. The figure on the video nodded, then reached forward, and her fingertip touched the lens. The screen cracked down the center like brittle glass. When he looked up, his own reflection bore the same fracture across its face. That night, the house moved. Pictures tilted as though stirred by breath. Mirrors fogged though the fire roared. Elias followed the whispers to the cellar, where rusted photographic equipment lay beneath tarps. He uncovered Edmund's last camera, its brass body tarnished but intact. A plate inside bore an undeveloped image. He carried it upstairs, trembling. When he held it near the lamplight, the latent picture surfaced slowly. Edmund, Clara, and a third figure standing between them, blurred, but unmistakably. Glass shattering, the figures' faces reflected briefly in each shard before fading. The next evening, Elias awoke to find his reflection missing. The mirror showed only the room, no trace of him. He waved, spoke, even touched the glass. Nothing. Panic clawed at him. Then movement, not from within, but beside him. His reflection stepped out from the mirror, dressed in Edmund's waistcoat, skin pale as film. "You shouldn't have watched," it murmured. Elias stumbled backward, breath frozen. The figure smiled, then vanished, leaving behind only the faint smell of chemicals and a wet handprint on the glass. Facing outward, by dawn, every mirror in the estate had clouded white. Elias stood in the center of the study, surrounded by their breath-like fog. Faint outlines moved within each one. Clara's face here, Edmund's silhouette there, his own form multiplying endlessly. Their voices overlapped, whispering his name in different tones. He clutched the diary to his chest, trembling. "If the mirror remembers," Clara had written, "then break its memory." He lifted a candlestick and struck the glass. It shattered with a sound like thunder. The fragments fell, each reflecting a different version of him, one crying, one smiling, one gone. The morning after the shattering, silence filled the house like fog. Elias collected the fragments, unable to look directly into any of them. Each sliver reflected a different moment. Him entering the estate, him reading Clara's diary, him asleep at his desk. One piece showed something else entirely. Himself, filming from behind the camera, expression blank, movements reversed. He realized then that the camera had never been recording him. He had been recording for someone else. The timeline looped in on itself. He whispered, "When did this begin?" A voice from the shards answered, "It never stopped." He rewatched the oldest footage, the night he thought the haunting began. But this time the angles were wrong. A second figure stood in the corner, barely visible in the shadows. It moved exactly when he did, just out of sync. Elias scrubbed the footage forward. The man turned, revealing his face. It was himself, older, eyes hollow, wearing Edmund's waistcoat. His future self. The recording trembled, then flickered to static. On the desk beside him, Clara's diary flipped open on its own. New words bled through the paper. "You were always here." The air thickened with realization. "No, we're two." Elias searched every record, every diary, finding no mention of Edmund's death, only notes about successive trials. What if Edmund hadn't vanished, but merged, becoming one with his reflection caught in an endless recording? He approached the mirror again, touching the largest remaining shard. It was warm, pulsing faintly. From within, Edmund's voice whispered, "Finish what I began." Elias's reflection smiled faintly, though he did not. The glass drew breath. He saw his own face begin to fade, replaced by Edmund's features forming beneath his skin. He resisted at first, smashing cameras, boarding windows, refusing to look at any reflective surface. But the images followed him. The lens of his own eyes seemed to retain after an ages. He saw Edmund's silhouette standing behind every doorway. His voice echoed through the pipes, the mirrors, even the glass of a teacup. "You are the camera," the whisper said. "You are the record." When Elias looked down at his hands, the skin shimmered faintly. Like film catching light, his veins darkened to silver, and the faint hum of old machinery throbbed beneath his pulse. As evening descended, Elias set up one last recording. He aimed the camera at the mirror, stepped into frame, and pressed record. The red light blinked once. His reflection did not mirror him this time. It watched. Slowly, it began to move backward, replaying every moment. The footprints, the wave, the whisper. Elias reached out, palm to glass. His reflection did the same, closing the distance until their hands met. The mirror rippled, swallowing sound. For one endless second, both versions of Elias occupied the same space. Then only one remained. He smiled faintly. The camera continued, recording long after the room fell empty. The house no longer obeyed sequence. When Elias opened a door, he stepped into another century. Candlelight flickered over velvet wallpaper, the air thick with coal smoke. He could hear Edmund's voice from the parlor, instructing Clara to stand still for just one final exposure. He hid behind the doorway, heart hammering, realizing he was witnessing the past. Clara trembled before the mirror, eyes glistening with fear. Edmund adjusted the camera, oblivious to Elias watching from the future. Then Edmund turned suddenly, staring straight at him through 100 years of air, and smiled as if expecting him all along. Elias whispered, "Stop, you'll trap her." But his voice did not carry through time. It echoed only inside his skull. Edmund fired the shutter. A flash of magnesium flooded the room with white. Clara screamed, not in pain, but in disintegration. Her body blurred like smoke caught in wind, drawn into the mirror's surface. The glass rippled, swallowing her whole. Edmund fell to his knees, sobbing and laughing at once. "It worked," he murmured. "She's eternal." From where Elias stood, Clara's reflection turned toward him inside the glass, eyes pleading silently for release. The blast of light threw Elias backward into darkness. When he rose, the room had changed. Modern again, his laptop humming faintly on the desk, but Clara's voice whispered from every reflection, "Let me out." On the monitor, her face pressed against the inside of the screen, lips moving soundlessly. Behind her, Edmund's reflection loomed, eyes hollow. Elias felt pressure in his chest, as if the glass wanted him too. He placed his hand on the monitor. The image warped, colors bleeding like melted film. His own reflection replaced hers, mouthing the same plea. Time collapsed inward. Elias's breath fogged with every century he exhaled. He stumbled through hallways shifting between eras, wallpaper rotting, restoring, then peeling again. Every mirror he passed showed a different phase of himself. Child, scholar, madman, corpse. Clara's voice threaded through them all, whispering, "He built this to remember." The walls pulsed like lungs. At the corridor's end, the final mirror stood cracked, leaking faint golden light. He reached for it, and from the other side, Edmund's hand met his own. The warmth felt familiar, like touching a memory that refused to die. The estate convulsed as thunder split above. The glass in every frame and lens vibrated like struck bells. Elias saw Clara's face in each reflection, multiplied infinitely, crying out in silent agony. He raised the diary high, realizing it was never a record. It was a key. "Break the memory," he whispered, echoing her words. He hurled it into the final mirror. The explosion of light erased sound. The pages burst into flame midair. When the brilliance faded, the house stood still, silent, emptied of all reflection, save for one faint outline of Elias, smiling inside the glass. Rain fell for 3 days before anyone reached Pembroke Estate. The local constable unlocked the warped front door, his boots sinking into the soaked carpet. The study smelled of ozone and ash. Every mirror lay shattered, except one. A small, unbroken piece leaning against the hearth. On the desk, a camera still recorded, its red light blinking patiently. The footage displayed only static, until a faint figure began to form within the haze. A man's face, pale and still. The constable leaned closer, squinting. The lips in the static moved once, forming a word that sounded like his own name. The investigators cataloged the remains: broken lenses, scorched paper, streaks of silver nitrate on the floor. Hale noted that the walls seemed unnaturally reflective, as if polished from within. When his assistant took photographs, each image developed wrong. Figures appeared where none had stood. A woman's outline, a man reaching from behind, and the blurred shape of someone holding a diary. Hale wiped his brow, muttering that the house was bleeding through itself. As he turned to leave, he caught movement in the corner of his vision, a reflection walking just a moment behind him. By dusk, Hale ordered the estate sealed. Yet before leaving, he lingered by the surviving mirror shard. In its surface, the light shifted oddly, as if another room existed beyond. For an instant, he saw Elias standing there, alive, adjusting a camera just as he had described in his notes. Behind him floated Clara's reflection, calm now, her eyes no longer pleading. They both looked directly at Hale. Then Elias raised his hand and waved. The same gesture recorded in the first video. Hale stepped back sharply. The shard fell from its perch, landing face up. The reflection remained, smiling faintly from the floor. Days later, Hale reviewed the evidence footage. Most files were corrupted, but one video opened. The final clip from Elias's camera. The study appeared empty. After several minutes, the mirror's surface darkened, and faint movement stirred within it. Elias's reflection stepped forward, expression calm. "It's recording," he whispered. "It always has been." Then he turned the camera toward the viewer, toward Hale himself, and the feed cut abruptly to black. Hale sat frozen in his office, staring at his own reflection in the darkened monitor. It smiled back a moment too late. Months later, the estate was sold at auction. The new owners restored its walls, replaced its mirrors, and spoke often of the beautiful light that filled the study at dawn. They never noticed the faint hum behind the plaster, the subtle vibration of hidden lenses. On quiet nights, the new tenant swears the camera's red light still blinks faintly in the dark, and that a man's silhouette appears in every reflection, watching patiently. Somewhere inside the glass, Elias Ward continues his work, forever adjusting the focus, forever waiting for the next viewer to look back.